K.O.E. Nation.
I have updated totals. We are just over the 2-hour mark at 2 hours and 4 minutes, and we have an in-studio total of 116 and a grand total of 288.
Tony, right here, the beer I'm opening.
Yes.
Oh my God.
That's 117, which again, I waited until the exact number that the boss admitted to on David Letterman. So I matched the boss's in fucking studio record of 117 to you, Andre the Giant, for the years of joy and everybody that you've entertained for the years and the people that have spread the very idea of yourself and for everybody that enjoyed it. All of you, I raise this glass to you. God bless every last one of you, and thank you for making the 4th annual Andre the Giant Beer Bash a massive fucking success and hit. God bless every last one of you. This one's for you. Yes, it is, folks. Yes, it is. Welcome, one and all, to the K.O.E. Nation. Let me make sure you're getting the beautiful. Yes, you're getting every sweet, soft summer sound that is my voice. Welcome, one and all, to the K.O.E. Nation, folks. It is I, the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower, the prince and potentate of the political parlance, the lord of the Scottish Highlands. One damn handsome man, if I do say so myself. Your king of extreme, Phil K.O.E. Folks, I cannot wait to show you all the crazy stuff we got going, folks. But, you know, it's been quite a week, hasn't it? And so, folks, we are here at the K.O.E. Nation on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, and Twitters, where you can find me at. We're also here on Big Buckin' Empire on YouTube and Facebook. You can also find us for first time in a long time, once again, upon the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. How are we all doing, you folks? Bandit, I don't think I've seen that shirt since that podcast. Yeah. Well, you know, it's good fashion. What can I say? So, folks, how are we all doing this fine evening? We got a lot to get into. We're going to get into quite a few things in pop culture, but because this is the first broadcast of the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast in a long time, we're going to get through the results of Crown Jewel, and then we're going to get on to South Park Into the Panderverse. So, the results for 2023 Crown Jewel. And I saw the matches. I did a lot of fast forwarding and stuff. Busy guy. But Sami Zayn versus JD McDonough. It was a classic Sami Zayn, just shaky leg sale. But in the end, this was just trying to get JD McDonough some experience on the... Oh, okay. Oh, now I get what you're saying. It's been a long time. Way to make it weird. I try. I'm very good at that. Come on, give me some points there. I'm very good at making it weird. Okay, but in the end, Sami Zayn got the defeat, but it put McDonough in front of a big crowd, and it gave him some experience that he needs, and it gave him, whether he knows it or not, some very needed star power. Then we had Seth Rollins defend against Drew McIntyre. And it was a well put together match where Drew literally only lost because he was off by one beat. It was just one minor mistake, but it was one that they really emphasized. And very well done on Drew's part. And then we get the cash in. By the way, because it's been such a good couple of days, I've just been having a marvelous week. I'm just going to say that. I'm celebrating with a good bourbon tonight. Old Forester 1870 original batch, the old bottling, not the new bottling. That's marvelous. Let's see. Bennett, you see the NFL player that was killed on the ice this week? No. Oh, are you talking about the NHL player? Because an NFL player... but yeah, I heard something about that, and I'm like, we'll get into that a little later. But so then when Drew sadly loses, good match, good match. That's when Damian Priest comes out to cash in his money in the bank. But Damian Priest doesn't get the chance because good old Sami Zayn for the fucking save again, which was marvelous. I loved it. And it gives us a reason to kind of keep caring. And if Sami Zayn could be the guy to take that briefcase somehow, some way, and cash it in on Roman, and then of course lose to the tribal chief, but that would be amazing. That would be stupendous. Bandy goes, yeah, NHL. Yeah, I heard about that. That sounds like one of those things the courts are going to have to figure that one out. That seems a little hairy, but marvelous. Then we had a Women's World Championship match. Rhea Ripley versus Nia Jax versus Shayna Baszler versus Zoe Stark versus Raquel Rodriguez. Rhea Ripley. Yeah, that's what this match was. This was to show off Rhea Ripley to an international crowd. And it did that quite well. And in the end, Ripley got the W. Wasn't one that I was just like, oh God, I gotta see this match because I knew what it was. It was to get Ripley over. Excuse me. John Cena versus Solo Sikoa. I thought, why are they making Sikoa do the job? Why are they gonna make this poor kid lay out like this? Boy, was I wrong. Solo. Boy, are you getting some serious rub. Because in the end, Sikoa defeated Cena via pinfall 1, 2, 3. You can say, oh, what about the chicanery? What doesn't matter. He still got the W. Also, moving on to the United States Championship. Rey Mysterio versus Logan Paul. I called it early. It should have happened months ago, but we now finally have Logan Paul as United States champion. That has needed to happen for a long time. It's going to actually make that title worth something. And also give Logan Paul credit for saving Rey Mysterio's life at one point. If you watch them, boy, they tried to edit around it, but yeah, give Logan a little bit of credit there. But anyhow, Paul is now United States champion, and it is glorious. It is marvelous. It is beautiful, and I love it. I can't sing it's. Hang on one second. Hey, JoJo. Oh, she's got her headphones in. Wait. Hey, I'm on live. I don't know if you know this. Just tonight, or actually earlier today, Logan Paul won the WWE United States Championship. What do you think about that? Against Rey Mysterio.
Was that the guy who was talking about his wife online?
Rey Mysterio? No, different guy.
Okay, because if it was that guy, I would be like, as it should be.
No, but just Mexican wrestling legend Rey Mysterio. But Logan Paul is now a champion in the WWE. What do you think about that?
He came so far from Bizarre Park, but it's kind of weird. I don't know.
That's right. He was the Bizarre Park guy, and now he's United States champion. I don't know how to feel about that one. That one's just weird. But
I only knew him from Bizarre Park, and that was it.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, kiddo, I'm going to be talking about South Park here a little later. I might ask your opinion. But hey, that was awesome. So neither of us really know how to feel about that, but I think it's awesome. Okay. Then we've got Io Sky versus Bianca Belair, which was basically the impetus to bring back Kairi Sane. That was the whole point of this entire endeavor, is how can we get Kairi Sane back in a way that makes sense? And we got it. We got it. But Sky defeat Belair via pinfall to retain WWE Women's Champion. But great match nonetheless. Kairi Sane is back. So Cody Rhodes versus Damian Priest. I'll be honest, I didn't really see too much of this one. Sorry, got caught up. But it was marvelous from the few highlights that I saw. Rey Mysterio has the Dollar Tree Emperor Palpatine eyes. But so looks like Rhodes defeated Priest via pinfall. So it has not been Damian Priest night because Sami Zayn stopped him from cashing in. He loses. So this was one of those nights he probably just shouldn't have got on the plane. Then we got the main event, the undisputed WWE Universal Championship, Roman Reigns versus LA Knight. Now, hey, folks, I'm starting to get like the bot, like, advertisers coming into my comments here. That means you're getting somewhere. No, I'm kidding. Roman Reigns versus LA Knight. The tribal chief comes in champion. And of course, the tribal chief walks out champion. So this was an interesting evening. Not a lot that shifted. Not like there wasn't like any huge, like the only big deal was John Cena dropping the W to Solo Sikoa. Like giving Solo Sikoa that W was huge for Solo's career. Like that's probably, no, without a shadow of a doubt, that's the biggest win of his career, getting a W over the man who cannot be seen, one Jonathan Cena. So, Crown Jewel, the house show in the desert. I was actually pretty impressed. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't get time to watch the Cody match, but other than that, actually a very impressive card. And it's one of those like, how soon until they just have a WrestleMania out in the desert? How soon until WrestleMania Riyadh? It almost rolls off the tongue, don't it? Yeah, that's coming some point down the pike. I don't like it any more than you do, but get ready. Ouch. Hi, that's marvelous. So now we shift gears from WWE to something that's a little bit wider on all of our minds. And that is South Park Into the Panderverse. If you have seen this particular episode, everyone seems to love it. Everyone seems to think it's bolstering their side. And almost nobody is catching just how very meta this is. But also, there's a reason this is timed as it is. What a lot of people don't know is in 2024, Mickey becomes free to use. The copyright expires on Mickey Mouse and it becomes public domain. And when that goes down, oh God Almighty. I don't know. Me and the kiddo watched it on HBO Max. And I think so. You might want to look into that because I think there is a few places where you can just see it straight up. But Into the Panderverse is, without giving away any spoilers, because it's really something you need to see. It obviously tears in deep to the idea of just swapping race and gender of characters just for the sake of diversity points. It really tears into that entire idea that we've seen in entertainment in the last few years. It also kind of tears into the naysayers quite a bit. It really, like, even some people that you wouldn't think that would have a redemption arc in this particular episode do. And it's a fascinating look, but it does meet head on the accusation that so many people in Hollywood, when they get to do a new take on these titles, they're not responsible with the things that we love. Okay? Like, yeah, we grew up loving things like Indiana Jones, and we grew up loving things like Star Wars, and the people that were in charge of them weren't responsible with them. And I do appreciate the fact that that was met head on. Now, the biggest thing is when Mickey becomes public domain, they're going to make a South Park feature length movie. And it's going to be about the Panderverse. It's going to be about Disney. It's going to be about Bob Iger. It's going to be about there's actually a plan where it's going to be modern day Mickey versus like, tugboat Mickey, like old school Mickey. And those two are going to have a fight. And that's going to be a thing. Now, I'm going to see if I can get her attention again. Hey, now I'm talking about South Park. Okay, first of all, did you like the South Park Into the Panderverse episode?
Actually, I really liked it. It's one of their better episodes.
I got to agree. And like, do you understand how like everybody on the political aisle is kind of saying, no, they're agreeing with me right now. Like the people on the right are saying they do, and
yeah, I can kind of get it, but I'm like, but I don't really know.
No, that's totally fine. I just think now, biggest question. When the South Park movie hits the theater, we're going to go see that in theaters opening night, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. All righty, kiddo. Is there anything else you want to say to the people about South Park Into the Panderverse or anything in general? To the millions of K.O.E fans. All right, have fun. Love you, kiddo. All right, so you got the Zoomer perspective there, folks. What else do you need? Yes, the K.O.E Nation gives all perspectives. So yeah, when the South Park movie drops, like this is their first movie in I think 20 years. Yeah, I'm going to see that, like without a shadow of a doubt. Most of us are. And it's going to be an event, and it'll be one of the few things that actually fills the theaters. And that's the irony, is what's going to fill the theaters is basically just a giant fuck you, Disney. Like that's all it is. That's literally what the movie's going to be, and it's going to pack the place. It's going to be hilarious. So I'm looking forward to that. I like the fact that there's finally some pushback. Now, the problem is with some franchises like Star Wars, the damage is done. There's nothing you can do. Like you can't even like undo it and be like, oh, that was just all Luke having a crazy dream. Like without like, yeah, you can't get out of it now. And I do have to say, I think it was Chris Gore who said it when it comes to the Star Wars franchise in particular. The fact that in the sequels, there was no point where Luke, Leia, and Han had any moment standing in the Millennium Falcon and just let the audience indulge in that moment. That is studio malpractice. Like they said in South Park, these are people being irresponsible with the things that we love. Okay. And there is some legitimacy when fans give some pushback to that. So I'm curious what all your thoughts are about Into the Panderverse. Did you like the episode? I actually really liked the whole theme of it. And I liked how you could still kind of see the original characters a little bit through the Panderverse, but it was still just this weird overwoke parody. They had that Chewie, we're home. Now, granted, it's been a long time since I've gotten into those movies, and I didn't enjoy them when I saw them. So, and I didn't finish all of them. So I'll have to go back. Maybe send me that in a YouTube clip or something. But I don't know. I don't think there was a scene where everybody was together. But there's sure there was sure some stuff that folks didn't like. I really didn't like the idea of Luke being a hobo. Like that just seemed completely alien. Bandit, I didn't say they were good. That is very true. That is very true. Now, folks, as we move onward and upward here, there's something that I'm very proud of that I got to do not too terribly long ago. And that is an interview that I got to do with a mysterious ghost hunter. This is somebody that some of you may know, some of you may not, but this is something that I'm actually really proud of. It turned out very well, and it actually had some very good interest. So, folks, without further ado, this is the interview with a ghost hunter. You have arrived at the K.O.E. Nation. I am your King of Extreme, Phil, K.O.E., the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes you the podcast hour. You can, of course, find me right here at Big Buckin' Empire on YouTube and Facebook, Hazard Analysis on YouTube, and, of course, K.O.E. Nation on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter. And I am joined this evening by my indomitable broadcast partner, the one, the only,
the 5, 10, 15-time Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast champion, the non-Kappa friendly, the quadruple distilled, the non-chill filtered, Tony fucking G. Find me on TikTok /Tony the Rod, at Tony the Rod on the TikTok. Yeah, that's pretty much that. And we're starting out this pre-recorded, God forbid, holy shit. Yeah, just throw the babies in the air, cancel your credit cards, default on your mortgage, and just cry yourself to sleep. Recorded episode of.
I don't know if you should do all those things.
No, just do, because apparently that's the only thing you can do when we are not live, is just cry about it and cry more.
I mean, I get it. Your life is tumult and chaos without live interaction with us, but
here we are anyway for the Dog and Chicken Show, and we are literally here, Phil and Tony G, residents of Nebraska, at the Chicken Coop, which resides in South Dakota. Yep. And do you see fucking Chicken of the Chicken Coop? No, he's outside being a cunt.
Tony, you and I are denizens of the great state of Nebraska.
Yes.
And also, I want to tie this in as a twofer. You also are the head of the GRIP Paranormal Investigation Group. Is this correct?
I am, yes.
Yes. Now, I don't know how things are ranked in that particular world, but you seem to be the main driving force of GRIP Paranormal.
Yes, that's fair.
Now, as you know, as residents of Nebraska, I have been trying to get us on a hunt for the fabled Salt Witch of Nebraska.
Right.
So, if I may, I want to read real quick here just the very short account. It's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs. It's 6 paragraphs.
And as you bring it up, I not just a week ago did a 5-minute guest spot on a podcast called Meet the Elite Podcast. You can catch my 5-minute little episode on, I believe, Spotify. It's never really heard of it, never knew of it, but they contacted me and said, hey, come do a little spot on our show, Meet the Elite Podcast. Check it out on Spotify. Tony G.
Will do.
I think it's on there now.
Moving on up in the world, T. Oh, whoopsie daisies.
Then there's that.
Moving on up in the world, T. So, the reason I bring this up is because I would really like to get into that sometime because it fascinates me.
Right.
Not even because I particularly think we're going to find anything, but just because this is such an interesting piece of Native American lore that it needs to be documented and to a much greater extent. Because this, what I'm about to read to you folks, is the only documentation.
I want to specify that there's the distinct difference right out of the gate is we're not talking about, holy shit, my house is terrifying me. This is Native American lore.
Yes.
There's a distinct difference.
Well, let me get into this.
All right.
The Salt Witch of the Nebraska Plains by Charles N. Skinner. In 1896, a pillar of snowy salt once stood on the Nebraska Plain, about 40 miles above the point where the Saline River flows into the Platte River, and white men used to hear of it as the Salt Witch. An Indian native tribe, was for a long time quartered at the junction of the river. It's a chief, a man of blood and muscle in whom his people gloried, but so fierce withal that nobody made a companion of him except his wife, who alone could check his tigress rage. In truth, he loved her so well that on her death he became a recluse and shut himself within a lodge, refusing to see anybody. This mood endured with him so long that mutterings were heard in the tribe, and there was talk of choosing another chief. Some of this talk he must have heard, for one morning he emerged in war dress, and without a word to anyone strode across the plains to the westward. On returning a full month later, he was more On returning a full month later, he was more communicative and had something unusual to relate. He also provided his prowess by brandishing a belt of fresh scalps before the eyes of his warriors. He had also brought a lump of salt. He told them that after traveling far over the prairie, he had thrown himself on the earth to sleep when he was aroused by a wailing sound close by. Then, in the light of a new moon, he saw a hideous old woman brandishing a tomahawk over the head of a younger one, who was kneeling, begging for mercy, and trying to shake off the grip from her throat. The sight of the woman 40 miles from the village surprised the chief that he ran toward them. The young woman made a desperate effort to free herself, but in vain, as it seemed, for the hag wound her left hand in her hair, while the other she raised an axe and was about to strike. At that moment, the chief gained a view of the face of the younger woman. It was that of his dead wife. With a snarl of wrath, he leapt upon the hag and buried his own hatchet in her brain. But before he could catch his wife in his arms, the earth had opened and both women disappeared. But a pillar of salt stood where he had seen this thing. For years, the natives maintained that the column was under the custody of the salt witch, and when they went there to gather salt, they would beat the ground with their clubs, believing that each blow fell upon her person and kept her from working other evils. By Charles M. Skinner, 1896, compiled and edited by Keith Weiser, Legends of America, updated June 2021. And so what I'm trying to find is a pillar of salt once stood on the Nebraska plain about 40 miles above the point where the Saline River flows into the Platte River. Now, that point, Tony, as I've looked up now, for at least about 70 years, there hasn't been a river called the Saline River.
Okay.
I try to keep looking it up. There's different accounts. And so, luckily, my dad actually, who pointed out on the map, okay, from everything you're describing here, and from anything I remember when I was a kid, this is probably your Saline River. And he pointed out to me the actual river that's probably the old Saline River.
Which is it?
I can't remember the name right now. Okay. He actually marked it out on a map. So all I gotta do is go find that map again. Okay. So it's not a big deal. Again, we're having fun here in the evening, but so my question to you is this something that interests you, and why or why not? Both answers equally fascinate me.
When you're talking about history, that's essentially that's the column of paranormal investigation, because anytime you want to talk about something that's strange, unexplainable, you have to first delve into the history of it, because if you don't delve into the history of it, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're basically just you're spooking yourself in a dark room. And by that, I mean you're doing yourself a disservice by getting yourself hyped up and scaring yourself for no other reason than the thrill of it. That's why you go see a scary movie. You watch a scary movie on Netflix. If you actually want to learn something and experience something, then you have to first delve into the history of it. You have to understand the lore of it. So in an instance like this, when you're talking about history, and let's be frank, a lot of folklore, which is what this is, because you can't specifically point to it on a map and find it specifically by getting directions. You have to make assumptions. You have to follow the lore. You have to search for it, in essence. So it's a different aspect of the field, but it's still interesting nonetheless. So there's a lot of folklore, regardless of what state you reside in. Like Nebraska has a lot, and a lot of it's bullshit. Now, something like this, as detailed as this, is a lot more intriguing than, say, just off the top of my head, for a ridiculous example, East 3rd Street in York, Nebraska. At midnight, people throw rocks at you. That was one of the most haunted things in the state, according to a website, for many years.
Certainly couldn't just be some kids throwing rocks.
Right. Yeah. No, Phil. Absolutely.
Couldn't just be a
insulting.
couple of kids fucking with you.
No,
It's got to be something paranormal.
Yeah, no, it's obviously demons.
Demons. Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, don't be a dick.
Thank you for clarifying. Like, I was afraid. No.
So but to me, this is when we talk about my first.
Yeah, I want to know, what's your first instinct when you hear this?
My first instinct is we're talking about history, and history itself gets embellished.
Okay.
And that's my immediate reaction when we're talking about anything regarding whether it's paranormal, folklore, spooky in any regard. I am immediately very, 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 very skeptical, and especially when it comes not to just history, but when the history delves specifically into folklore. Folklore, highly entertaining, highly interesting, and I like to find out where exactly the folklore started and why it went that way. I think it's highly interesting. Before I was a fan of creepypasta, I liked folklore tales.
Yeah, like, to me, like, again, you know me, in all these things, I'm highly skeptical. Okay, I've always been.
That's how you should interest these.
Like, but like, you've known me throughout my life, right, and my different, arcs. That like, I lived a very secular life where I didn't believe in anything that was unseen, and I was very skeptical of this. Now, I attend church, and I'm with very nice Christian people. They also don't believe in ghosts staying on this plane. Okay, so in any iteration,
believe in angels,
but they aren't ghosts that interfere in this plane. So we can get into scripture here a little later.
We're splitting hairs at this point, which is why it bothers me when people are just so determined to say, "No, I believe in this," but ghosts? No, it's crazy. But yeah, no, angels, absolutely helps me play baseball.
That's not exactly what
maybe
some people would classify their beliefs.
It's probably closer than you want to admit in some cases.
In some cases, sure, because there's a lot of people that just go to church and just pray for things. I want this bad thing to happen, this thing, and this good thing to happen.
I literally know people who have said the words, "I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in angels." Yeah, at that point, you're splitting hairs because you're still talking about an afterlife. But you're arguing the point of heaven versus.
Well, no. What I'm saying is Christian theology teaches that your soul does not linger in this plane past death.
Oh, because the Pope canceled purgatory.
Well, no, that's also a Protestant belief as well.
But we're still arguing heaven versus purgatory.
Well, no, we're arguing passing on versus staying here,
which is heaven versus purgatory.
Well, no. Unless you're saying Earth is purgatory, because if you're
the
saying
soul
a ghost
lingers on Earth, is that not purgatory? Concept alone.
I could see where you're coming at with that, but I'm just saying
that's not purgatory.
I'm just saying that's not consistent with Christian theology, as I understand it.
If we understand it from the Christian theology, we're talking heaven versus hell. Heaven is paradise.
Yeah.
The kingdom.
Now, actually,
hell is damnation. In between would literally be you are stuck in the soulless realm of where you cannot remain in the physical manner. Purgatory, you are on the physical plane, but not a physical being yourself. That is, as my understanding, purgatory.
Okay. Now,
before the Catholics canceled it.
I was about to say, I was raised Catholic, where purgatory was a very real thing when I was a kid. Okay. And literally when they said maybe not, I know people that this was devastating. Because purgatory is as real to me as anything else, was the exact quote that they would say. But as purgatory as I understood it, was kind of like a blank third realm that was.
It's waiting on a park bench.
Like when Beetlejuice was waiting in that that room in the
understand the Hollywood rendition.
That's kind of like. Well, not Tony. That's literally how tens of thousands of young Catholic children were instructed throughout the 90s. Okay,
my understanding of the teachings and writings of purgatory is you are unfortunately sitting in limbo, literally waiting watching the living embodiment of life, unable to interact with it as you were before death, before you can either ascend or descend. That is my understanding. That is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but
the interpretation of many religions.
Well, purgatory is a specifically Catholic invention that, like, basically it solved a mechanical problem. Because I was thinking about this the other day in the tractor. Like, strange enough, purgatory specifically.
Okay.
And it solved a very big mechanical issue for Catholics in that, what do we do about unbaptized babies and people who were good Christians, but
Because we can't send babies to hell.
But yes, or like people who were good Christians, but maybe didn't adhere to every single Catholic doctrine or dogma,
Yeah.
And didn't adhere to all the rituals strictly. What can we mechanically in our minds do about that?
Well, we're not going to torture them.
No,
But we can't send them to
But
hell.
all right, we're getting a little off here, because like what I'm talking about is like why I have my skepticisms.
Right.
But like going into this or any other hunt, like I'm not expecting to find anything for my own very defined reasons.
The likelihood of finding a ghost and the likelihood of finding an angel is literally the same percentage. It's almost zero. Because that's not something that you're going to experience. Because I'm sorry, it's just the cold hard truth. The Hollywoodization of the paranormal field, and this started many, many, many years ago when the Sci-Fi Channel and the Travel Channel started picking up paranormal investigative shows, and they started dramatizing it.
Oh yeah.
TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, out of
Show.
Northeastern. Oh, it started out actually fantastic. They did start out great because they had a great crew. They had an honest crew. It was scientifically based, and they're like, no, this is how we go about it. Like, we're going in very skeptical. And then it got very, very dramatized. And they're like, but they still tried to pretend it was very scientifically based. And instead, the Hollywoodization came in, took over. Things got bad. People had to leave the show because it got too kooky. And then people like Zach Baggins, you fucking pile of shit, piece of fuck you. I will fucking.
All right. So
fuck you, Zach Baggins. Fuck you. Literally.
Fair enough. That's fair. Now,
Ghost Adventures is the biggest crock of shit because that's what happened when Hollywood started dramatizing things. Because when ghost stories stopped being folklore and started being mainstream television, that's when everybody decided, I can do this. I'm not saying, oh, I got in on that before things were mainstream. I'm not going to pretend that. But I did my research. I tried to understand the field. I tried to go, how do people go about doing this before I go out and run around in the graveyard with a flashlight? Because that's embarrassing. But that's what people do because they don't understand the problem here. The problem here is if you want to investigate the paranormal, there's a ton of history into it. You have to get permission first and fucking foremost before you go out and do something stupid. And then go into it with an approach that's not, I'm going to find a ghost. Because if you go into a place that's dark and spooky thinking, I'm going to find a ghost, guess what? You're going to spook yourself into thinking, I just found a ghost.
Yep.
You have to have critical thinking and logical explanations running through your mind. And if you do not, your wildest imaginations are going to take over your understanding. And that's just how it is. 99% of the things that I have seen, which are, I will be honest, several things I have experienced personally have been pretty damn incredible. But they are explainable if you think about it.
We'll get there eventually. What's the one I'm looking for? There we go.
The one.
Hey,
that's the one.
The last one you look for.
Always is.
Because like I've got 3 questions that I eventually want to get to. But I'm kind of interested like at this point of like the skepticism and how people kind of go about it the wrong way.
Right.
And so the way that I'm going to open this is I want to gauge like these 3 different ideas. They're all kind of in the same vein, but I would want to gauge somebody like you, like, A, what would your level of personal interest be in pursuing each of these?
Okay.
And then if, like, say you had somebody that was willing to just be a patron for it and like says, Tony G, I want you to go on this hunt and do everything you can within your power. I will fully fund it. Okay. Like, how would you go about preparing for it.
No, I understand your approach to the question. So
and
yeah,
so
just
we're
hit me
gonna.
with it.
The first one will be
I already know how to
obviously
answer.
the
Yeah.
local salt witch. Okay. What would your level of interest be there? And then if some patron said, Tony, I'm just paying for it, get it done. How would you go about preparing for
Okay, so when you specifically talk about something this, I don't want to say hard in the pain or extreme, but you are legitimately strictly talking about something that is strictly folklore. You cannot find it on a map. It is 100%, let's be frank, hearsay. It's not something that is provable by measure. It's not something that's in a history book. It's something that is passed down generation. And to me, frankly, honestly, it's more interesting because it's the interpretation over the decades, over the centuries. And I find that very, very fascinating. And that's a lot of the local legends and the local hunts that I've found to be very interesting. And I've always gone into those if I get a chance to investigate those as this is probably bullshit. But I've read so much about it. I've been interested by this for so many years. I want to see it for myself, even though I know this is not going to be something that's going to change my life. It's not going to expand my mind. When you're talking about folklore specifically is just so, to me, interesting because you have to put your mind in the frame of when this was created. And if you're talking about something that stemmed from like the 1800s, you have to put yourself in that mind frame and think, when this folklore, when this local legend, when this story came about itself, what was the mind frame? What frame of mind was this person in when they started telling the story? How did people think in that day and age when this story started circulating? And to me, that's more interesting than anything because you have to accompany everything around you. You have to think about the times. It's time, it's space, it's everything. That let that local legend, that lore build and build and build. And that to me is more fascinating than even history alone because it's the tall tale getting taller and taller and taller over
to
the
me
years.
That's like it's like cultural art. I don't know how else to describe it. Like the Salt Witch is a great example of Midwestern native cultural art, for lack of better terms. And so that's what's fascinating about it to me. Now, Tony, we're going to shift gears from our region. So, okay, I'm curious what your level of interest would be in this. And then let's say your patron is like, I don't care. You get all the stuff you have to, and you bag me one of these things. And so, like, this guy's a real TB, a real true believer. Okay? Like, and
TB stands for tuberculosis.
Oh, yeah.
In the paranormal field. Sorry, it just does.
I thought that was the medical field.
Nope, tuberculosis.
Okay. So he's a true believer. Okay? He truly believes this thing is out here. And he's willing to patron you for it and like go the whole 9 yards. And he wants you to investigate the Wendigo.
Okay, so the Wendigo, you're talking specifically this is not local folklore. This is not local legend.
This is kind of like the Rust Belt, Great Lakes area.
Okay, so yeah.
For lack of.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, you're talking northern, eastern local legend, but this isn't that's not local folklore. You're mostly talking cryptozoology at this point because this isn't oh my gosh, there's a ghost, there's a specter, there's a spirit, there's an angel, there's a demon. This is an unknown.
That's why we're bringing the paranormal investigator in.
This is an unknown entity that is a living, breathing organism. That's the difference between a ghost or a demon or a specter versus a being, a beast, a crazy, unknown, living, breathing animal. Cryptozoology is it's in the same realm, but it's not even remotely distinguishable from something that when we think about it, we're thinking about cryptozoology. Let's compare it to ideally, let's say Bigfoot versus a ghost. Let's say the Loch Ness Monster versus a specter. It's not comparable because we're talking about potentially one thing that lived at one point and died, and now it's the soul that lingers on the astral plane, on the purgatory plane, versus something that we've never cataloged on a organism base because it's highly different. And when we're talking about something like, say, as old as time as the Loch Ness Monster versus something as more modern, let's be frank, as the Wendigo, which is a lot more reasonable because we can really imagine that. And that's what it is. When you're talking about something like the Loch Ness Monster, that's something that's been passed on from eon and generation, decade to decade, specific to one location. Whereas like the Wendigo is more, you can picture this in your head and be much, much more frightened of it, which actually helps to add to the
legend,
internal legend folklore. It's not local folklore specifically, it's more internal because it's all about the idea and the presence and the possibility of something like this existing. And you can create this in your own mind. And that's what makes it spooky and scary in one's own perception, because when you think about it, you're like, everything this being and this organism does is completely logical. This exists on a plane that we understand. This is completely realistic to think. We don't understand all the beings that exist in the world. Look at the ocean floor. When you investigate the deepest portions of the ocean, you think, we don't understand all the creatures that live on the bottom of the ocean, and we couldn't possibly, because we can't chart those. We can't understand the crazy conceptions that are on the bottom of the ocean. Like when we discover new life on the bottom of the ocean, it's mind-blowing to us, because how does this creature exist? And that's why when you look at something that exists on grass, on soil, on dirt, within our region of the United States, of the continent that we live on, that's what makes it scary. Because when we're talking about the ocean, it's like uncharted waters, depths that we'll never personally experience unless we are oceanographers. But when we're talking about just, my God, if we go out into the woods, we could experience a man-eating being that's never been recorded on film, picture, or any geographical book. That's what makes the concept terrifying to the human mind. Because let's be frank, do you think right now, the people that are listening to me, watching this right now, do you honestly think we have visibly, understandably charted all living organisms that live above the surface? And if you say yes, you're just wrong. That's not a concept that's realistic.
I was about to say there's an account in, I believe, is either the First or Second World War, where there was these folks in the military that were flying very low, and they saw this massive snake in Africa, which is like supposed to be like snakes should not get this big, extinct species, basically.
Sure.
And they like fly low to see, and they multiple like very honorable folks in the military who retired with honors. Multiple eyewitnesses said this giant snake actually snapped at their plane. It was so large. And so we have, there's areas of the Congo that have not been explored. There's areas of Africa that no human foot has ever stepped foot. There's areas, believe it or not, despite how densely populated it is, China, that there's areas that we haven't actually explored.
None that are charted that we can actually confirm that we've stepped foot on as a species of man.
Yeah, within our
understanding.
To be frank, let's put it at about 50,000 years. What I would call, like, I know evolutionarily speaking, it goes back further, but I call modern man about 50,000 years ago to today.
Fair.
And our modern footsteps have never stepped foot in most of these places. So there's definitely more species that we don't know of and can't account of. So that's one. So what would your level of interest be for something like that?
So when we're talking strictly cryptozoology, it's
like, is that, I don't know, is that not exactly your specialty, but it's something that if you had to, you could dabble.
So
is that a fair characterization? Or?
Yeah, it's a fair characterization. But like, to be frank, just to give complete clarification, when I was a young child, let's say like 5, 6, 7, 8, that age range, you remember when the local library in town, in our small town, expanded from the small portion that it was into the large building that it is now. Do you remember that expansion process?
Yes.
Okay. So when that happened specifically, I remember very, very, very vividly before that process and expansion happened, there was a section on the left side when you walk straight in. There was the desk where the librarian sat, and on the left, on the very end bookcase, you could find not science fiction, but it was an entire section of crypto, ghosts, aliens, and all the sort. And I would go there. That's where I would go. And there was an entire section of books. They weren't very thick. They weren't.
I remember them well.
They weren't very in depth, but it had visuals and it had the text at the time as to the age range I was. It was very appealing.
I actually took my daughter to that public library, and we looked at those same books a few years ago.
I believe they were orange on the cover, black and white pictures, very simple text, and it gave a very introductory understanding of these things. It always fascinated me. So these concepts always fascinate me. So when we're talking about cryptozoology, yeah, it's in the same realm. But if you're talking about me as somebody who's been investigating the paranormal since 2011, and I've never once gone on a specific crypto case, it's like, example, the only one that you can truly give that would be realistic would be somebody who like hunts Bigfoot. That's what they do. That's the best example of crypto I can give. It's a very, very different thing because you do 100% expect to come back with physical evidence. When you're investigating the paranormal, you do not, and you should not, expect to come back with physical evidence because we're not talking about physical realm. With crypto, yes, you are talking, the goal is specifically physical, visible, organismal, proof of an entity that exists on the real plane of something that we have never charted before. So it's highly interesting, highly sought after. And it's very interesting. It's not something I've personally embarked on myself, but yeah, when you're blending those two things like you're talking about here, we're talking about a witch versus crypto, and could it exist on the same plane? Absolutely, because there's no given understanding of that. But when we're talking about a ghost versus like the Loch Ness monster, it's not even remotely the same thing. It's just not.
Okay. Now, that kind of answers what was going to be the third question, but now I've altered it because the third question was, and it sounds like it's going to be more or less the same. What would you do in preparation for an investigation of the Skinwalker?
Okay.
In the American Southwest, but like I'll get an abbreviated answer on that, and then we'll. All right, so Tony, the Skinwalker. So
I have my basic concept understanding of the Skinwalker, but let's be frank, this is more of an SCP creepypasta type concept. It's not. This is more modern writing than it is local folklore. No.
The Skinwalker is very old Southwest native. You have to break a very big taboo in order to become which is why this is more like witchcraft, voodoo, getting into the realm of like. Now, I don't think those Skinwalkers are real. I'm
going to be frank.
But this is a story.
That's the modern interpretation of it, though, because there is local folklore there.
You have to skin an animal to turn into it.
It is local folklore. There's an aspect of that, but there's a lot of modern interpretation that goes along with it. And the thing I liked about local folklore, that like when the internet, I'll be frank, one of the biggest things that drew me into the internet, I was not, when I was a kid, scary movies scared the hell out of me. I didn't love them. I didn't like them at all. They spooked the fuck out of me. Like Chucky, when I would go into the bathroom, I would kick the goddamn shower curtain open because that thing freaked me the fuck out. I was not a scary movie kid, but for whatever reason, eventually one thing just clicked, and I liked the concept of like Michael Myers and ghosts and aliens. And eventually, when I liked aliens and Bigfoot and Nessie, I didn't like the idea of like Michael Myers and Chucky. And then eventually the things intertwined. And I think it was the interpretation of the internet, because the early stage of the internet, for whatever reason, I stumbled across an early stage website of very, very, very localized folklore. And that's why I bring that word up so often. it was just local folklore of stories from very, very early on, pilgrimage, witch hunt, that
Mhm.
era. And I found them so fascinating. Some were extraordinary, ridiculous, and some are just like, that's so detailed, it's believable. And it was this is the early stage of the internet where my 13-year-old mind didn't know how to comprehend the difference anyway. And that always stuck with me. So when we're talking about something as specific as a skinwalker, there's a ton of modern flair on it, but a ton of local folklore plus lore and legend, neither specific to region, but also kind of specific to region. So
Like-
please give me your
Well, like
specific
one thing to
interpretation.
kind of spin off of that, like talking about going back to the Wendigo a little bit.
Right.
The horns is a very modern thing that only came in vogue, like literally, I think in the 70s.
Okay.
When
Yeah.
like some fictional interpretations showed a Wendigo with horns just because it was more dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally it's somebody that's very gaunt, their eyes are sunken, and it's a metaphor for not turning to cannibalism in very, very bad climates where there's a lot of cold. And to me, it's kind of the psychological tale of, if you do this, if you commit this sin, if you commit this taboo, you will become the Wendigo.
But when you say specifically Wendigo, we're still, this is where the gray area begins, because you are still talking about an organismal being versus something
in
that's
this
not.
moment, I'm talking
Because
about
the Wendigo kind of
a
transcends
cultural
both.
idea, like kind of like almost like an evil Santa Claus.
You've kind of got to
because-
explain what the Wendigo, because it's
Okay,
specific.
For those who don't know, the Wendigo is a native spirit in the sort of Great Lakes region, which to me always served as a cautionary tale for people that even if times turn truly bad, do not turn to cannibalism, because it will corrupt your spirit. It will corrupt
Right.
your soul. It will, in a way, turn you into a Wendigo. And there actually
Was
is...
it a deterrent for people to just not be the most animalistic
Yes.
interpretation
Like,
of
yeah,
themselves?
like it was very much a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was also like, the boogeyman, like, oh, if you children behave,
Yeah.
otherwise the Wendigo will eat you. And like,
Okay.
and so that's how I always saw the Wendigo. Now, again, that's my interpretation. Now, the Skinwalker.
Yeah.
The Skinwalker, as I
And
know
the
it.
difference between the two.
Okay, the Wendigo, think of it more like a werewolf in that it doesn't have a lot of higher brain functions. It has
Okay.
some levels of intelligence, but not a lot. It's kind of like it's a thing that cannot be reasoned with. Okay, like its hunger is insatiable.
Right.
According to the legends, the Skinwalker, even though it is in these animal forms, maintains its human intelligence the entire time, which makes it a fascinating thing to that's not a bad one. Which makes it a fascinating thing to consider. Now, again, this is all just, like you said, folklore, but like from everything I've ever heard, everything I've ever read, and old family tales,
Right.
which I have some family from
Sure.
the American Southwest. I have some native ancestry from my grandmother's side. She was half Greek, half Hispanic native. It's complicated.
Sure. No, yeah.
But
Paganistic stuff is it's funny how
good way of putting it.
pagan, not rituals, but retellings of stories carry over to different, not just religions, but folklore, but dressed up as not religion, but kind of religion.
Yeah, that's now like one of the things that it's kind of, it takes on a pseudo religious quality. But one thing I was always told about the Skinwalker is that it's somebody that has committed one of the most heinous taboos against one of their own family.
And
which
the
is either-
Skinwalker is still something that lives amongst the living. It's not dead. It's not a ghost.
It's
a
allegedly a human that gained a tremendous amount of power through committing the awful taboo of either murdering or graping one of their own family members, and
But's
then
now cursed with their existence a horrible existence with that power.
That kind of depends on which tribal,
Okay. Yeah.
like some will say like it's just purely like the villain of the story,
Right.
and for some like there's this weird
It's the
arc
it's the point of ascension you could not possibly imagine to attain.
I wouldn't quite go that far, but
No, okay, maybe not as
it's
tremendous.
always the Skinwalker's always a heel. Okay,
Right,
like
yeah,
in all
that's-
theology is always a
That's
heel.
what I'm getting at. It's a bad guy.
But like in order to change into whatever animal it wants to, it has to first capture and then skin it ritualistically, which is why no skinwalkers ever change into like a bear or
Right.
like something like that, because that's a little difficult to change into.
So okay, in terms of specifically the
Coyotes, on the
skinwalker-
other hand, most skinwalkers are known like the animal that they're most associated with is the coyote.
Okay, so we're still talking about something within the realm of it's highly susceptible to something on the food chain that is well respected in terms. Jesus, the bear, which is very high in the food chain. Let's be frank, the human being, unless it has the proper tools, is going to get absolutely manhandled by the bear
Or bear handle.
So we're still even in cryptozoology talking about something that is highly susceptible to even a human being. Let's be frank, because when it comes to cryptozoology and when it comes to the food chain of the understood human ladder, where we rank, a human being versus a bear, for example, stands absolutely no chance whatsoever unless
it's Phil K.O.E.
I was going to switch cameras, but no. No, the understanding is no, the human being in a physical altercation stands no chance versus the bear. But from an IQ standpoint, if the human being has access to the proper tools and environment.
Basically, if he's got Batman prep time.
Oh, yeah, no, Batman prep time, that's completely different. That's not even close.
But
so
like,
it's
I
about the IQ.
I understand some of your trepidation. You're just like, so Phil, what you're telling me here is the Skinwalker here has less magical power than a brown bear.
That's pretty much what you kind of said. Because you just said to get its shit rocked by a bear, but it's better than a human.
Mm-hmm.
So there
See,
you go.
I was like, that might be nice. Whatever taboo you did, but it gave you less magical power than something about 290 pounds.
So then versus
Like
say then the Wendigo versus the Skinwalker.
Ooh, that one's tough because now this is purely just fantasy, like
fantasy,
Royal Rumble.
Fantasy booking, we're total skeptics.
Okay, the Skinwalker has the intelligence factor, but Wendigo is just so overwhelming. And also, to the native legends, the more they would eat, the larger they would grow, because that way they would never be satisfied. They would never be satiated.
So the mass does take an interpretation here, where eventually it could be much more mass based than a bear.
Oh yeah, much larger.
Okay,
and like in one of it was. I'll have to send it to you. It's great creepypasta that talked about like it was this Black Ops military force that goes out and hunts Wendigos and stuff, and like on their comms like warning, Algonquin, which was their code word for Wendigo. And they talked about these things that are 14 feet tall and they're just coming at them. And so fascinating. I'll send it the story to you. It was very well written. But like, so that's the idea, is it will get bigger and bigger and bigger because it can never be insatiated. It will always, like, it's always eating, not just because it's hungry, but because it cannot feel warmth.
So it's not a comparable crypto, but it's on the same realm of existence if you want to commit to believing in the crypto and the creepypasta trends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, well, to me, it's like one's the tale of the American desert, one's the tale of the Great Lakes and the northern cold lands.
So region does play into this.
Yes, very much.
I get that, but one is very limited, where the other's power and intimidation factor is a lot more expanded. So again, I want to go back to this. Like it's for me personally, it's very specific. It's very awkward. Like like when people ask me, like, what brought you to being like, why do you want to like hunt ghosts? What the fuck? Why would you want to do this? Again, it was the basic concept of a handful of books that I found in the library that I found very, very, very fascinating. The concept of what's above, out there in the realm of space that we can't possibly chart or imagine, what exists on an astral plane already on this earth that we can't possibly imagine, and in another dimension. What cryptoids are there out there that we have not charted? Like, those are the things that fascinate me, because we go about our daily business and our daily lives going, there are things that are absolutely absurd, that we think that's ridiculous. Yet at one time, most things were ridiculous until they weren't. And that's kind of always been my driving force. Like, most of the stuff I've seen, that I've experienced, the cases that I've gone on, the ghost hunts that I've experienced, it's mostly explainable. But what the fuck if I happen to be one of those people in those instances that's just super damn lucky to happen to find that one little itty bitty piece of footage that expands the concept of what we understand as the astral plane, the celestial being, the other dimension, the ghost realm, the afterlife, if you will. And I get to not only capture that on evidence, but experience it firsthand. I'd be a fool not to want to try to be there, be the person that catches that. Again, 99% of the time, that's just not going to happen because I'm a realist. But Jesus, what the fuck if?
Now that's fascinating, because I thought your answer for the Wendigo was just going to be like a ditto, or your answer for the Skinwalker was just going to be a ditto for your Wendigo answer. But no, there was a lot more depth to that. So that was fascinating. Now, we're going to shift gears slightly, because I think this is getting back into your expertise here. This is my third question here. This is a little bit closer to our region and something that I've wanted to do for a long time. The Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado.
Yes.
Okay, like, now it's famous
Highly,
place. I mean, The Shining, wasn't that where they filmed The Shining?
So,
am I off on that?
no.
I think that's where it was.
So the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado was the concept of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, but it was not filmed in Estes Park. The TV movie-ish, which starred not Joe from Wings, but his brother, for the TV made-for-movie version of The Shining, was actually filmed on location at the Stanley Hotel. But that does not disqualify, because the Stanley Hotel has an absolute ton of history. It does. I don't think the maze scene either was filmed there, but the concept transcends. I've talked to a lot of people that have visited the Stanley. I know many people very, very close to me who have visited there, who've driven by there, who've toured there. It's a place that I've always wanted to go. And again, I bring back up Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel, the first iteration of real paranormal investigation that I really got to watch and understand their process. They've done live investigations on TV of the Stanley more than once. And it's, I'm sorry, it's one of those things where I'm like,
be honest.
Everybody kind of just killed it for me. It's architecturally speaking, I would love to go to this building. I've
been there one time years ago. Now, my family for years has gone to Estes Park, Colorado for vacations. Like when I was, I think the first time I went, I was maybe 7. Okay. And the last time I went with our family on a trip, I think was 16. Okay. And so it was a nice long, and it was almost every year. I think
20-ish years ago.
Yeah. But I've gone with my daughter a few times and taken her, and she loved it. Took her to the same taffy shop, the same, all that stuff. My mother always refused to stay at the Stanley, but she finally, one time she had to go up there because we've actually got some family not too far off and had to do something for them. And we actually went into the Stanley to just go to the bar to get a drink. Just because I just want to see this place. I just started walking around.
Oh, yeah. That's
unfortunately, it's if you want to start walking too deep, you got to pay for the tour. Okay, like that was, and my mom didn't want to stick around for the tour,
Understandable. Yeah.
and she hates paranormal stuff, and she didn't want to
Sure.
do it. Like, yeah, that's
I get it.
that's basically Satan as far as
Yeah,
she's
that's fine.
concerned.
That's
okay,
fair. Get it.
And so, but beautiful building,
It's
like
yeah.
oh my god, it's
That's half the fun.
like it's what you imagine like Gotham City. Like you remember the
Yeah.
Val Kilmer Gotham City or the George Clooney Gotham City, and like what you would
Yeah.
imagine the insides of the buildings to look
Yes,
like.
yes,
That's what the
yes.
Stanley looks like. Okay.
Yes, and that's a big part of it. Like when Chicken and I first founded Grip, it wasn't like, okay, sure, yeah, a big part of it is I want to find me some fucking ghosts. That sounds great. But another portion of it, the first case he and I went on, literally, this is the story. This is how this went down. We talked about this for years. Like, we should do this. We should do this. We should do this. And one day, he sends me a text message. I can't believe we haven't done this yet. And I went, yeah, I can't believe we haven't done this yet either. I get nothing in response for about 10 minutes. And then 11 minutes later, we're doing this. This is the date. This is where we're going. This is it. I went, gee, what? What? Wait, what? And triple what? And in the 10 minutes, we'd traded like 2 text messages. He had contacted the curator of a historical society in a small-ish town in Nebraska who happened to live in a plantation-style home outside of a small-ish, large-ish town, who'd lived there in their youth, who'd moved away out of state, and who moved back and lived there currently. And they're just so pleasant, and it was so perfect. It was just so perfect because it was a person who appreciated history, who wasn't shut down to the idea of the paranormal. And it was perfect. It was just so perfect. It was just the two of us, and it was a very intimate meeting, and we got to talk about it. And it was all the concepts that I'd understood about the paranormal up until that point before I actually got to go out and do it myself. And I got to spew that out like I was an expert. And I wasn't. It was my first fucking time ever. And Chicken's like, Jesus, you sat down and started talking like you've been doing this for years. And I'm like, I kind of feel like I have, but I've never done it. And we sat down, we did this. We did the sit down interview, and then we finally go out and we do the actual investigation. And it literally could not have gone more picture perfect. You know, we got black and white infrared footage and audio recordings of things that you shouldn't get your first time out. And it spoiled us. I'll be frank. It did. It did.
Now,
and I'm not talking about stuff that like, oh, we were just above we were punching above our weight class, but like things like, no, we kind of had an idea of like, no, this is bullshit. Don't fall for this trap. We had a pretty good understanding. But at the same time, like, we definitely found some things that were not things you should find on your first outing. And that ruined me for a long time. So I again, I've seen, I've heard, I've felt, I've understood a lot of things that were things that other people will probably never understand or be able to experience themselves. But at the same time, if you're experiencing things greater than what I might be explaining, you might not have looked hard enough for the actual explanation. Because again, I'm still a realist at heart.
Now, okay, full disclosure, I've gone with you on a ghost hunt
Yes.
before. And before that, I showed my mom some of your footage before I went. And, you know, my mom, she's always got a pretty good sense of humor, but she's also, like, pretty sharp with her. Like,
Sure.
I was showing her one of your intros, and it shows basically, like, a cabinet door swinging open.
That one's
anybody
100%
touching.
legitimate.
Oh, I know, but, like, my mom, she sees that and goes, oh, yeah, that's it. I'm convinced. It's the ghost.
I know.
Like, it's like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's you're working. Like, I feel like what you're doing here.
No, I
it's kind of
totally
like
understand.
kicking water uphill
I
because
understand.
it's so hard. But
That's one of those pieces of footage where when it happened, that was we returned to the same location I just described. It was our second outing. It's a room. It's kind of a discarded room. It's a storage room that's in the upper stairs of this house. She hadn't gone in weeks, and this cabinet door is cracked. Let's say this much. She hadn't gone up there in weeks, and this cabinet door had been cracked like that literally for weeks. She hadn't gone in this room. Chicken and I are sitting downstairs where our base camp, our table, and all of our equipment are set up. And you can check this in time with the audio recording and the video footage that we had. We asked specifically, please open a door. And in real time, with the timestamp of the CCTV footage, within like less than a minute, that cabinet door that you just described on its own opens. It's not.
I know.
I know it sounds completely ludicrous, and even myself, like I'm looking at it to this day, and I'm like, obviously we caused a wind gust to fuck with this and make it open. We had to have done this, but again, it sat like that for weeks, and we tried to instigate a response. And that specifically for me, when we're talking about the paranormal, if you can get something to respond to you, if you can instigate something to give you back to what you want, if you ask specifically for something, knocks, taps, interaction, that's when it goes from being I'm reaching, and that's when it starts delving into actual, I don't like using the word evidence, but it's a lot closer to evidence than people going, my God, I feel like I'm being possessed.
Yeah, that like there that is kind of one of the big problems is like I've been on a hunt with you before because like it was during COVID and everybody dropped out. And
Yep.
What's going on there? Okay, all right.
But
yeah, I went with you on a hunt during COVID. Everybody dropped out. It was one of those.
Yeah, we had a couple of people drop out, and I'm like, Phil, I'd love you to go with us one time.
And I was like, I kind of felt like I was just being a good friend. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. Like, oh boy,
I just want you to experience.
Everybody dropped out on the ghost hunt. Now, what I'm gonna say is, I understand why it happens because, because. Well done. I figured you were going to lose a tooth over that one.
Fake anyway.
The temptation to play along on a ghost hunt is
easy.
Obscenely high because, like, all right, Tony.
Yes.
I don't know. Like my grandmother years ago took me to the play of Peter Pan.
Right. Don't know why that still froze.
Yeah, let's just keep here. But like my grandmother took me to the play of Peter Pan. And if you ever go to the physical play, which you need to sometime, there's this one beautiful moment where Tinkerbell through the whole play is just portrayed as this little light, just this little bright shining light on on the
just
stage.
A floating orb. Yeah.
And then there's this moment where the light starts to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And then I think it's Peter Pan, or maybe the narrator, comes out and says, we need you, the audience, and especially the children, to say, I believe in fairies. And that's the only thing that can say, and you, the audience, you say, I believe in fairies. I believe in fairies, and the light gets bright. And there is such a gravitational pull to want to believe in these things, which is why it's so like. Even
that's why it works. Yeah,
like I found myself like not being mean to the one girl who was thinking a demon was in the world. Like it's like I like in my mind I'm thinking
you're getting caught up in the moment.
But like I felt not like I'm not gonna be mean to her, but. Dude,
you're unfortunately that's 100% accurate because the people that want to go out and do this want to experience something so badly that they're going to be easily convinced, and that's again why I stress this. Understand what you're getting yourself into. Understand what you have to bring along with you, and understand the mind frame that you have to have when you go to do this. Because I've never, ever, ever, ever once, in the 50 cases I've done, over the multiple locations that I've experienced, gone in going, I'm going to find me a fucking ghost tonight. Because you just can't do that. And if you do that, guess what? You're going to find a ghost.
No,
because it's conjured up in your own mind.
I'm not going to name any names, but there's at least a couple people that I've encountered on ghost hunts with you that go into every ghost hunt convinced they're going to meet a ghost.
And you're not going to be able to change people's mind.
They have.
Right. Like, and you're not going to be able to change people's mind on this because that, unfortunately, is just how the human mind operates. Like, and unfortunately, when you're talking about things like ghosts, the concept is the afterlife. Is it specifically religious? No, but it's going to play into that. It's just going to. So, again, it's just, I've never, and people scoff at me. People have been in the field longer than I have, or attempted to be. I say, I try not to take a religious understanding into my investigation. And they go, why not? I'm like, because you're just doing yourself a disservice at this point. Because if you take that concept in, you're doing yourself a disservice because you already have a preconceived notion. And if you take a preconceived notion into this, you're going to have a bias, whether you think so or not, whether you understand it or not, whether you realize it or not. And the best experiences I have had personally doing paranormal investigation have not been going to famous haunted locations like the Villisca Axe Murder House or the Waverly Hills Tuberculosis Sanatorium in Kentucky. It's been doing private residences in small town rural Nebraska or wherever with people who are actually literally scared to exist in their home, who've contacted me specifically and said, I heard that you can help me. And I'm like, I'll do my best. And we've gone into their home as guests, invited because they're scared, and gone, I don't know what's going on in my home. And here's what happened. We were able to put the pieces of the puzzle together and figure out, logically speaking, completely explainable, why they were feeling uneasy, why they felt scared in their home, and told them, look, the ground wiring in your furnace room was bad and it made you paranoid because high frequencies of this, or your AC was running at such a reverberation that, believe it or not, if it runs at a specific frequency, can make you hallucinate. These are real phenomenon that happen and are physically explainable. And when you can actually do that and tell somebody, no, you're not actually crazy, and it may not be the answer that you wanted, but you're going to be able to sleep in your house tonight without having to be completely freaked out. That's more rewarding to me than finding somebody running around on a sheet in the fucking halls of a jail.
Tony, I'm going to leave it with this one last question here, because this is a central question. Because you seem to be trying to apply, when you say I'm not getting into a religious interpretation, so you seem to be trying to apply the scientific method of thesis, hypothesis, and repeatable testing to the paranormal.
Yes.
With all of your investigations and with all of that being in consideration, would it not be reasonable to come to the conclusion that this is not true?
That what's not true?
The paranormal.
Oh, no, 1,000,000%. Yes, absolutely. Because the idea and the concept of the paranormal at its core, you cannot sit here and tell me that it's not based off of local folklore, witchcraft, ghost stories, and the like. It's just going to stem from that, because the greatest story ever told is one that the human mind cannot conceptually understand. That's why stories snowball. That's why local folklore takes on lives of their own. That's why they grow. That's why they get bigger. That's why they survive decades and decades and decades, because they're so tremendous and intriguing. From a scientific approach, like I liked the Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster books, going to the library. And as the decades and years fell off the calendar, the idea of a dinosaur in the Scotland Loch came more and more and more ridiculous, because no, this, logistically speaking, is ridiculous. But the concept of like aliens and not technically ghosts, but something on a different plane, that you can't necessarily disprove, just like you can't disprove something on the religious scale. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? The same concept applies. So, of course, it could be absolutely, this doesn't exist. And more times than not, I'm going in going, this probably doesn't exist. The claims that you're making, I'm not telling you it's bullshit, but I'm going to believe what you're saying, and I'm going to try to find the answer as to why, and I'm going to try to find the answer of how before you've concluded the why.
Interesting. Well, T, that is a very fascinating little glimpse into the world of grip. That from the past and some of your perspectives, I'm curious. Other than obviously the Salt Witch investigation, other
Indeed.
than obviously going to the Stanley, is there anything that's kind of piquing your interest that you'd like to get into? Now, I know it's like, especially in this economy and in everything in the world, it's really hard to get all like with grip. I've noticed a lot of clocks need to strike the same hour at the same time.
True. Yeah.
And
Well, that's that. Yeah, that's just any day or age. Yeah, of life.
Yeah, so I'm curious, is there anything that like you definitely want to like I want to investigate this before I'm too old that my knees
Right.
won't let me do it when I'm in my 60s or 70s?
So some of the big ones that I've wanted to do, I've done the Villisca Axe Murder House 3 times now, which is just I'll be frank, it's location close by in Nebraska. I'm lucky enough to be able to have done that so many times. It's an incredible place. It's very nerve ending the first time, but once you're used to it, you kind of get it. And the history is so spine chillingly terrorizing. That's a great location, even though it's not. I'll save my personal biases, whatever. But great location. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, was on my bucket list to visit, regardless of what I did. I wanted to see it. I got to experience it. I got to experience the building itself and the architecture, and it's so large, and the history is so big, and the deaths over the course of tuberculosis in the thousands. It's incredible. It's ridiculous. It's terrifying. That was one of those places I always wanted to see, and I got to do that. And it didn't intimidate me because I'd done this for so long. I thought it would, and it just didn't. I was just, get me the fuck in this building so I can experience this. There's other places like the Winchester Mystery House that I believe in some region of California.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about
the story is the widow that built this house she lost her mind and she started building staircases. Nowhere there was always a construction crew on site to build and build and build onto the house, because she just got, as the ghosts would follow her around room to room, if they just kept building onto the house, it would confuse the ghosts. It's apparently a very interesting location. The Lizzie Borden house in the Northeast is supposed to be very interesting. Love to see that. A lot of great places in the Southwest. As well as the Southeast, Louisiana, especially. A lot
Louisiana.
of voodoo. Yes. There's a lot of great places. There's, internationally speaking, a lot of great places as well. But you have to go into these places with a certain level of confidence. And eventually you get that. Because whether you believe in it or not, you think it's all bullshit. Once you're actually looking at it, you're there, and it's big, and it's right in front of you, and you're like, oh yeah, everything I've read about this, everything I've been told about this, everything I've watched about this, I think it's all bullshit. But now it's right in front of me. Even if I think it's only like a 0.005 chance that there might be something there, what if that's that? And now I'm about to walk into this shit. It's still pretty fucking intimidating, whether you want to admit it or not. So you just got to remember to keep your fucking head about you, and not let yourself delve into the mind of madness, which a lot of people unfortunately do. And once you let yourself disbelieve the reality that's surrounding you, once you let your mind dictate what you're seeing, what you're understanding, hearing, feeling, etc., once the senses leave your body and you just go with the flow, you've got to remember to keep reason within your mind. Because if you don't, you're screwed. And that's really it.
Well, Tony, on behalf of Big Bucket Empire on YouTube and Facebook, K.O.E Nation on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter,
Yes.
and Hazard Analysis on YouTube.
Indeed.
Thank you for sharing some of your experiences with grip and Grip Paranormal. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people?
Really, it's just I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen, I've felt, I've heard a lot of great things, and I've been on location with people who have allegedly seen, felt, heard, etc. A lot of great things. The number one question I'm asked is, "Oh, do you believe in ghosts, or what's the best thing you've ever seen?" And I never know how to answer that because I don't know how to give an answer that's going to actually give them the answer that they want. Because I could sit here and bullshit all day and say, "Oh yeah, I saw a shadow person walk into a wall," or I had a ghost tug on the back of my fucking underwear. Which those are things that have happened. How do you explain that though? How do you explain that and actually make it make sense? Without going, no, yeah, that's totally exactly what happened without the actual possibility.
When it's not measurable.
Right, exactly.
It's always hard.
Measurable. You've got to understand the situation. And for me, it's overcoming. You've got to replace fear with curiosity. And that's always kind of been the mantra. Don't get freaked out even if you're curious, because once the curiosity delves into fear, you're fucked. You've only got so many days on this realm, and if you want to spend a few of them trying to have a bigger, larger understanding of some of the other aspects of it, more power to you. And I encourage it. But just remember, your mind is your most powerful tool. Don't let it fool you, but don't let it betray you either.
Well, folks, as I'm known to say around here, all that being said, thank you for joining us for this very special interview discussion with Tony G of Grip Paranormal and the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast and Tony the Rod 2.0, or actually, no, just Tony the Rod.
Tony the Rod.
On TikTok, folks. I just got so used to that 2.0
Me too.
by now.
Me too.
But, folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I hope all of you make it back here to the Big Bucket Empire happy, healthy, much the wiser. God bless. Travel well.
Yes.
All right.
That was the interview with a ghost hunter with one Tony fucking G. But since it was referenced, and since I didn't get a chance to get to it during All Hallows Eve, one moment. I had to talk to the kiddo. But since it was referenced, I'm going to pull up the haunted house hunt that me and Tony did at Malvern Manor in Iowa 3 years ago. It was really something. So, folks, this is just pure joy, and it was fun. And it was me cutting promos on all the ghosts. Enjoy. Wow, my whole intro. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the K.O.E. Nation for a special Halloween edition. I am the King of the Ethereal, Phil K.O.E., here to show you a journey into the fantastic. When your King of Extreme, Phil K.O.E., joined forces for the ghostly research and investigation of the paranormal team to investigate Malvern Manor, one of the most haunted places in the United States. And you will see how your King of Extreme fared in such an environment. So prepare yourself, folks.
So as I was saying earlier, to me, I view ghosts and all of the supernatural creatures that we have as totems, psychological totems for us to try to find or extract some sort of truth out of. To me, like, whether we're talking about any of the supernatural creatures that last in our fiction, whether we're talking about ghosts, werewolves, vampires, zombies, doesn't really matter which one that's lasted, they have a strong psychological totem that represents something. And as I was saying, I'll get to ghosts last, but like vampires are a clear metaphor for sociopaths. The idea that you have to let them into your life, you have to invite them in, just like the vampire, you have to invite them into your house. They suck you of your very lifeblood, or in this case, your energy. A sociopath will be a psychic vampire. So I see vampires as a kind of a warning story, a cautionary tale to children. Look out, there's psychic vampires out there that will drain you if you like. Zombies, our era of coronavirus, actually does show why the zombie metaphor has stuck around for so long. When you're out in public, you're looking at everyone like, are they potentially infected? Are they the one that's going to infect me? Am I going to get it because of you, or you, or you, or you? And then the moment you think you might have the virus, a fascinating thing happens. You're part of the herd, and they hear you might have the virus, and they all fucking turn on you. And you're just like the one person in a George A. Romero movie when you're looking at all the zombies around you. Now suddenly you're not part of the group. You're not in the herd anymore. You're the outsider. You're the one that needs to be destroyed. I think the reason it's been such a powerful metaphor that's lasted for over 10,000 years is the idea that it's a psychological totem for past crimes that need exposing. Because in any ghost story, which this place that we're at is perfect for this. Any ghost story that you hear generally talks about a past crime, a spirit that cannot move on to rest until it at some point the crime is exposed, and then the ghost can move on to rest. That's the general progression. I know there's infinite variants, but that's the general progression. And to me, that is a marvelous metaphor for, in some families, certain crimes, certain misdeeds end up getting hidden. Nobody talks about them. They stay as hidden and as opaque as the curtains behind you, or as opaque as the old dusty furniture. And they never talk about it. It never gets exposed. And over generations, it just gets swept under the rug. My general take on psychological totems and its connection to the supernatural. Could be right, could be wrong, but it's always been something that's fascinating. So, any questions? I like to keep my audience riveted. So, folks, all you out there, got any questions? Let us know down here. Okay. So, folks, this is the hallway of the Running Man. Apparently, out of the end of that hallway, people are seeing some sort of phantasm, some sort of specter, some sort of unsatisfied spirit that comes out and runs at you as fast as it possibly can. I am skeptical on this, folks, but here we are. I will trudge forward for you. For science, for discovery, and most importantly of all, for you, the K.O.E. Nation. Here we are. This is apparently the room. Now, as you can see, folks, not letting us in. Not letting us into the room of the Running Man. Oh, you can get a crack in there. Mirror. Yep, all right. Unfortunately, we can't get in there, but I was able to get a peek into the source of the ethereal, folks. So, these are the sacrifices that I make for you, K.O.E. Nation. But let's move on. Let's move on. Make sure not to get the lasers in your eyeballs. That applies to all you at home as well. Down here was where I heard an unusual noise. Kind of like a crackling of a wood wick on a wood wick candle. Couldn't really identify it though, but it just came from this general area. Fascinating nonetheless. Fascinating. But now, folks, whether you choose to believe any of that is entirely up to you. I heard something, but the idea that Occam's razor could not be applied to it, at this point, I'm still somewhat incredulous. So we will see how the evening progresses. But let's step into this. And a lovely showing of well-wishing by previous guests, because the woman that inhabited this room had been abandoned by her husband, and apparently she lost her mind over it. And so some lovely well-wisher left a note here that said, "You are loved." That is a marvelous sentiment, isn't it, folks? So, this is the end of this hallway, but it is certainly not the end of our journey. One last walk down Running Man Hall. This is a room that apparently a woman with multiple personality disorder spent too many of her days living in. They said that she had up to 13 different personalities, which is way above the normal average for any multiple personality disorder. So that alone makes this case very interesting. This is where she lived. This is where she spent the majority of her life. Here are her glasses. Here's a photo of her opening presents of Christmas. These are the kind of cases that make up haunted houses, folks. These are the kind of stories that bring people to these kinds of houses. These are the stories of life taken, time taken, injustice brought upon people, maltreatment brought upon those who didn't deserve it. These are the kind of stories that bring people to these haunted manors. Ah, yes. The second story. Now, it must be said, this kind of architecture into this woodwork is just amazing. You don't see that anymore. Something I couldn't help but notice. But here we are, the second floor. Quite a few things do happen. Supposedly, the captain's quarters. So this is where most people supposedly, allegedly, encounter the captain. The person who actually founded this whole building. This is where people meet that phantasm, that specter, that unresting spirit. Here is where they come to try and experience some of that. Whether they do or not, that's entirely up to you. Now, I had to just note that somebody had the good taste to leave a Cuban round Taste of Havana cigar here for the captain. Out of respect for Captain, I'll leave it here. Although, boy, that is tempting to smoke that. I will leave your cigar there for you, sir. I am respectful. This is Susie's room. Susie was a woman who was in her mid to late 30s who, unfortunately for her, had the mental acuity of a child. She, as you can see from all of these drawings, she generally didn't mature past a certain point. And because of that childlike innocence, I do believe that's what draws some people to this room and to trying to contact this specter, because it's an idea of innocence lost. And that is compelling, no matter how you try to look at it. So, Susie, I do apologize for the many hardships you had to face, miss. May you rest in peace. Now, we move on to the main event of this particular floor. Room of Highness, supposedly. Now, there's a lot of things that are said about this room. There's a lot of stories, some of them connected, some of them not. It's a story of tragedy. It's a story of loss. It's a story of death that came far too early. A little girl, 12 years old, hangs herself by a jump rope just a block away from here. And now people don't know why they feel that this spirit is tied here, because there was no physical connection here. So that's where the speculation runs wild. Some people even say, take what you will of it, some even say that this room faces demonic possession. Now, I'll leave that up to you, the audience, to see if you agree with that or not. But this is the room that draws so many people. This is the room that causes so much confusion. This is the room that gives so many a feeling of deep unease. And that's why we are here to explore this room. We're here to explore the ethereal. We're here to explore this house. We were told not to go here, but you know how I am with following the rules and instructions. So we got one more spot to stop on. Phil's Tour of Wackies. It's the room that they make you sign a waiver for if you come. Okay. The attic. Warm. It is warm up here, folks. So this is the attic. This is the reason they make you sign a waiver if you even come here. They say that if you've experienced psychological terror of any kind, this manor is not to be held legally liable or responsible. That is quite the waiver. I'll give it to you. That's a great sales pitch. Got me to come up here. Now, whether or not we actually experience anything here tonight, that's a different matter. But this room is full of so much mystery. They didn't know what it was for. They didn't know who stayed in it. They didn't know who used it or why. I have a feeling that the incredible research team here at GRIP, give us enough time, we'll get to the bottom of it, folks.
Did anything change on the hallway camera? Because when I came out of Gracie's room, it looked like somebody was down here with a flashlight. And then Phil came out of the other room on the other side of the hallway, so nobody was down here. And the laser grid is off now. So I'm wondering if it wasn't the laser grid shutting off.
It's still
No, we didn't notice anything.
Okay. That's odd.
Hold on, Art.
What you got there?
No signature on it anywhere.
Oh. Interesting.
Just trying to find a signatory piece. Nothing. Thinking maybe it might have been made by a former. Oh, that's too bad. No kid shoe.
Huh, that's detailed.
I think that might be a photograph, or is that?
No, it's not. Is that watercolor?
I don't know.
What the? Do you feel like a gust of wind? Does that flap that thing around? Twist it like that. Maybe that's what it was. Just got hit with a cold chill. I think it was just you turning
There's
on
a
that.
lot of art. Oh my!
Oh, that is.
Tiger's face.
Hmm.
Amazingly well done art.
Who's the artist?
That is the question. There's no signatory on the bottom here. There's on the back.
What the?
Markings here, but that
Bring
is
the flashlight over here. Is there a cobweb? Just getting my thighs tickled. Just continuously.
crazy good art.
Okay.
Wish we knew who the amateur artist was. Age 15. Malvern School, Malvern Community School. Malvern. Teacher's name, Mary Porty. Principal name, Tim Peterson. Drawing. Teacher's signature, student's signature. On the 11th of January, 1995. So this is while this place is in full swing.
Yeah.
So
Been
that's
10 years before it closed.
And if I had to guess, this was your submission. This was
Yeah, that is
that was her
very
submission.
well done.
That was. Well done, Quincy. I hope the other decades found you better than this one.
Indeed.
Here's another piece I suspect. Yes, again. Name of this artist for all of this stuff in here.
Wow.
Drops of tears, drops of blood,
That's interesting.
drops of black going up and down. That is intense, incredibly good art. Whatever happened to this? I wonder. Like, I hope that this wasn't as tragic as everyone else's that befall in this place. But if their art is here, I can only imagine.
That is a very abstract piece you've got there.
I haven't looked at it. I'm just trying to find a date on
Oh,
it.
it's
These were all turned in on the same day.
really.
All three of these were turned in on the exact same day, on the 11th of January, 1995. So there's the genie's lamp. 2 genie lamps. And all of this abstraction coming from it. So many, many decades after the fact, your art is getting greatly admired. I'm sorry it took this long. That really is too bad.
Yeah, very interesting art.
Such incredible talent
At a young age.
that had to languish in a place like this. That is the tragedies that bring people to places like this.
Oh, I can really see it now. It's
Buried alive. And then a bunch of other.
crystal clear in the dark.
I'll let you just film it there. The flashlight's getting a little funky.
Interesting.
We are here in Malvern Manor, in the room of the unknown. Nobody knows what this room was used for. Nobody knows who stayed here. Nobody knows its purpose. Nobody knows its reason. Yet here it stands. This is the room that they say you need to sign a waiver for when you're here. Whoever's here, whatever's here, if there is anything here, they say needs a peace offering. And that peace offering is in the form of alcohol. Consider my offering given. Such an interesting place. So many mysteries. We're here to try and unlock them. I think we're doing pretty good tonight. So, folks, this is a ghostly research and investigation into the paranormal. A very apt title. We've been here throughout this house this evening. We've seen, heard, and experienced things. Interesting things. And our evening isn't even fully concluded yet. Again, I'm here your king of extreme, now perhaps even the king of the ethereal. I have gone to the corners of this household, and the phantasms and their tricks have not impressed me. They have not moved me 1 inch. But the fun has been in the discovery, folks. So please join us. So we find ourselves here in the attic again. I'm here to perform a scientific test, if you will. In reality, this is me testing the limits of one's skepticism. Because would somebody who had any fear in their heart come up to the quote most feared part of the house, turn all the lights off, and get into quiet contemplation with you? So, we're being honest with ourselves, folks. The reason why some of these tales persist is because we're afraid of the dark, we're afraid to die, and we're willing to believe in stories so stupid and so asinine just to get out of the idea that we need to be afraid to die and we need to be afraid of the dark. And there's a way out of it. There's a reason. There's an explanation on the other side of it. But in reality, we know that we will die. We will go to darkness and silence. A part of us may live on, but not on this plane. That's the unfortunate reality. That's why these stories persist as they do. Here I am, at the belly of the beast of ghost stories in this town. And yet, despite that, all I feel is a great void. Nothing. A zero. And I suppose that's comforting and also a little disappointing in its own way. Let's be frank. Everybody comes to ghost hunts. I'm gonna find it. I found it. I found the spooky ghost. That's so rarely actually the case. That so rarely actually occurs. In fact, if you're a radical skeptic and a radical empiricist, you'd say that never happens. That never occurs. But I always like to leave some room open for the possible. Is it probable? No. Is it likely? Absolutely not. But always leave at least a little bit of room in your imagination open for the possible. And that is where places like this thrive. Because it allows what is possible within your own mind to just run wild. And that, in my opinion, is an experience more valuable than any other. Because belief in the supernatural, whether you believe in it or not yourself, is a connection to something that is valuable. I'm not sure what. Even if you don't personally believe in them, and I think that's completely not necessary, of some sort of wonderment in the supernatural, I still find is valuable. In the same reason that awe is still valuable to the human experience. So that's what I see this providing. So, folks, thank you for joining me on my little excursion. As we are here up in the attic of the unknown. I am your see, your King of Extreme is still here, all in one place, and has, as you can plainly see, conquered the ethereal. So, folks, this has been my experience joining the ghostly research and investigation of the paranormal team. And your King of Extreme has come out triumphant. Not only am I the King of Extreme, I am now the King of the Ethereal. My kingdom expands by the day. So, folks, like, share, subscribe, and join us.
Yes. So, folks, that was my ghost hunt at Malvern Manor with one Tony G and a couple of really great folks. But that has been this particular stream this evening, folks. And as I'm known to say around here, all that being said, thank you for joining us here at the K.O.E. Nation on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. Thank you for joining us here on Big Buckin' Empire, on YouTube, on Facebook. Thank you for joining us here on the Revolutionary Wrestling Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you for joining us, folks, everywhere on Hazard Analysis on YouTube. You're going to have to type in Hazard Analysis 001 and see me and Tony's beautiful face to actually get there, because the algorithm hates us that much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. God bless every last one of you. And I am going to leave you this week, folks, with one of the older poems of the week, God's Hall of Fame by Alf Hutchins, folks. God bless every last one of you. I hope all of you make it back here to the K.O.E. Nation. Happy, healthy, much the wiser. Raise a glass to yourselves. God bless all y'all. Travel well.
God's Hall of Fame by Alf Hutchinson. Your name may not appear down here in this world's Hall of Fame. You may be so unknown, few even know your name. Fame and fortune pass you by and are given to a few. But if you love and serve the Lord, then there is good news for you. This Hall of Fame is only good as long as time shall be. But keep in mind, God's Hall of Fame is for eternity. To have your name inscribed up there is greater, yes, by far, than all the halls of fame down here and every man-made star. This crowd on earth, they soon forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall, and that's how long you last. But God, he never does forget, and in his Hall of Fame, just believing in his Son, inscribed, you'll find your name. I tell you, my friend, I wouldn't trade my name, however small, that's written there beyond the stars in that celestial hall, for every famous name on earth or glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown here and have my name up there. God's Hall of Fame by Alf Hutchinson. Folks, if there's a poem that you'd like me to read, or you'd like me to read your poem, or just a poem that means something to you, please just let me know in the comments. I would love to do it, folks. I love the imagery of beautiful poetry. God bless every last one of you. Travel well. Sorry, little guy, you gotta go.